Hello everyone, welcome back. Sometimes a lot of times life gets in the way and things happen, and this last year has been hard. And I'll probably make a video about that soon. But I haven't made sourdough bread in quite a while because it was hard. So my starter went bad, and it takes a lot for a sourdough starter to go bad. But mine did, and I gave up on it. So I threw that out. I am creating a new starter from scratch. I do this with wheat ground into flour and water. That's it. You can use yogurt, you can use juices. I've seen lots of different ways, but to me, sourdough starter is wheat ground into flour and water, left to ferment, and it creates something magical. So that's what I do. Again, there's other ways of doing it. This is my way. So I decided this time I am going to create the sourdough starter using ancient grains. Now, do some research into this. Ancient grains are very different from the wheat and the flour that we get now. Very different. And there's several kinds. So again, there's a lot of research involved. But I decided to go with the oldest known cultivated ancient grain, ancient wheat, and that is einkorn. And it's very different from the wheat grown today. It looks different. The size of the grains are different. There's just a lot of differences. I have 4 of the ancient grains here. I bought all of them from Azure Standard. My link is below. I highly encourage you to check it out. Ancient grains, and especially the einkorn, have been shown that some people that have gluten sensitivities, not celiac disease, 2 different things, but gluten sensitivities do fine with einkorn. They may not be able to tolerate these others, but this is the original cultivated wheat that came from the cradle of civilization between the Tigris and Euphrates in the Middle East. And I'm going to tell you, I'm loving it so far. And that's without cooking with it yet. I have, but not ground from grain. I do grind my own. I have the Mock Mill 200, and I love it. I looked at the others, the more expensive ones, all those. This one does such a good job that you can adjust it. Even beyond this range, you can then make more adjustments and go even finer. So it's fast, it's fairly quiet, and it just does a really good job. I can grind one time to get the flour that I want. So as far as the wheat berries go, I have einkorn, which again is the oldest cultivated wheat. I have spelt, emmer, and then I have kamut, or Khorasan. There are a few others, but these are the 4 that I have on hand, all bought from Azure Standard. If you look at them closely, and I don't know if you'll see it because, I'm not sure if it'll show up on the video camera, but very different. Their colors, the size of the grains, and I will tell you the taste. because I tasted some of these wheat berries just to see. And they are all different. This is my favorite, just to take a few grains and munch on them. It's got a kind of nutty taste. They're very small wheat berries, which makes it harder to harvest. And it's not as profitable because it takes more wheat stalks to grow the same amount of grain, which is why it's not grown very much commercially. There's only a few people that I know of in the US and maybe even the world that grow these because it's just not as profitable, which means it is more expensive. But if you're one of those people that can't tolerate the newer grains and the gluten, this might be worth it to you. So, I have already ground some of the Einkorn wheat berries. And I put it in a very tightly sealed container. And I don't grind much at a time. Wheat does not keep well as flour, especially freshly ground. And for sourdough starter, you want whole wheat berries ground finely and as fresh as you can get them. The reason being, each one of these little grains has natural yeast on the bran. If you're buying all-purpose flour from the store, it has been sifted and most of the bran is gone. Not all. But that's where you'll get the yeast from. You can buy whole grain flour, and you can use any kind of, you could use rye, you could use barley flour, any of the grains, and use all their whole grain flours. You just will get different taste. I want the wheat, so this is what I'm going for. This was not even the finest grind that this mock mill will do, but it's pretty fine. This is not sifted. This is the whole wheat. Now, it will make a darker color starter, and it will make a darker color bread. You could sift this, but for making the starter, you don't want to do that. So, to make my sourdough starter, and I'm not going to measure real finely. It's going to be a rough measurement. I'm going to put about half of a cup into a pint canning jar. Like that. And again, I'm not measuring finely. I do want to watch texture. So for me, in my dry, well, semi-dry, it's been pretty wet lately, climate, I'll probably use about a third of a cup of water. Filtered water, well water, do not use chlorinated water. I'm just going to put it in there, mix it finely. Make sure you get all of the flour grains moistened. If you look, that's pretty thick. It's too thick and we want more water. and that is still too thick. That is more like, that's about what I'm looking for. And that was about 1/3 cup. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to cover this. I'm going to use a coffee filter. You can use a paper towel, you can use a cloth. But I have found these work really well. You don't want it sealed tightly. And I'll show you, that's kind of how it looks. You don't want it sealed tightly. You want it to be able to get air. But for my climate, I have to watch because it can get really dry. And again, mix it really well. You want to make sure that it's all moistened. And you're also incorporating air. So I've just put a coffee filter on here with a rubber band. I'm going to let this sit for probably 24 hours. If your house is really cold, it may take longer. You're looking for 68 to 70 degrees probably is a good temperature. If it's warmer, it may speed it up. So you just have to keep an eye on it. This is a living thing. So you might want to even give it a name because hopefully it's going to be around a long time. So I'm going to let this sit, and usually around every 24 hours, at least in the beginning, you're going to want to come check it. You're going to look for bubbles. You're going to stir it down, and you're going to remove about half. Discard that. Yes, it is necessary in the beginning. There's good bacteria and spores, and there's bad ones. At this point in the game, they're both going to be in there, and they have to fight each other out. If you take care of it properly, the good ones will win. They will give you that wonderful sourdough taste. And when it's ready, you'll see beautiful, fluffy, bigger bubbles. And that is what helps your bread to rise. So you'll discard about half each time you feed it. You'll go back and add about the same amount of flour and water. Again, getting it back to this consistency. And it could take 10 to 14 days, possibly even longer, but I would say 10 to 14 days, and you should have a really nice starter that will do anything you need it to do. So I'm going to put this little guy to bed, let him rest, and in the meantime, that yeast is going to start to become active. And you may not see a whole lot for a few days, but I'd say within 3 days you should start seeing a fair amount of bubbles. So I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to be feeding it for every couple days for a while. I'll come back and show you the progress as we go so that you can try this for yourself. Very easy. Doesn't take much to make it. Mason jar, something to cover it with, and a rubber band, some water, filtered or well, or spring maybe. And that's pretty much it, other than a little bit of patience and time. So I'm going to have to come up with a name for this. I'll let you know what it is next time. Thank you for watching, and God bless.